North Korea says it has attained its goal of being able to strike the U.S. mainland with a nuclear-tipped missile. After more than a two-month lull, the North fired on Wednesday what it says is a new missile, the Hwasong-15 ICBM.
And Pyongyang is calling it the country's most powerful missile yet. It claims that it successfully tested the missile topped with a super-large heavy warhead. International diplomacy swiftly kicked into high gear with the UN Security Council set to convene an emergency meeting.
김정은 동지는 사용의 대륙간 탄도로켓 화성 15형의 성공적 발사를 지켜보시면서 오늘 비로소 국가 핵무력 완성의 역사적 대여 로켓 강국 위협이 실현되었다고 긍지 높이 선포하시었다.
The broadcast shows images of the North's leader. Kim Jong-un appears to be signing the order for the launch. It was fired in the early hours of Wednesday morning north of Pyongyang before splashing down into the Sea of Japan. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe issued a stern protest against the launch.
This missile launch is a blatant violation of the will of the international community. We can't tolerate such an act. We have lodged a strong protest with North Korea.
Abe also spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump over the phone. Officials in Tokyo say the two leaders agreed the countries must strengthen their defense capabilities to deter the North threat. They also reportedly agreed that China needs to play a greater role in dealing with the issue. The Japanese government was monitoring every step of the pre-dawn launch.
Because it apparently flew well over 4,000 kilometers, we assume it was launched in a so-called lofted trajectory. We presume it's an ICBM type of missile, judging from the height and trajectory.
The ministry says the missile had the longest flight time and reached the highest altitude of any previous North Korean launch. Onodera says the ICBM fell into the country's exclusive economic zone after flying for more than 50 minutes. The missile could have traveled about 13,000 kilometers if it was on a standard trajectory. That means it's capable of reaching Washington, D.C. and any part of the continental United States. It has been more than 2 months since the North last fired a missile. The last one came in mid-September when one flew over northern Japan. Wednesday's launch comes after the United States relisted North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism. The American president was reportedly briefed about the launch while the missile was in mid-flight.
A missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it. We have General Mattis in the room with us, and we've had a long discussion on it. It is a situation that we will handle.
Trump says this will not change his policy. He's warned he would totally destroy North Korea if forced to defend the U.S. and its allies. Trump has repeatedly called on Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the international community must do more to enhance maritime security, including the right to interdict ships transporting goods to and from North Korea. Tillerson also says the U.S. and Canada will convene a meeting of countries that sent troops to the UN command during the Korean War, as well as Japan, to discuss how to deal with the threat. Reaction from South Korea was swift. Within minutes after the launch, its military held its own missile firing test, calling it a precision missile strike drill. President Moon reportedly said the drill demonstrated its capability to target the origin of North Korean provocations by striking a target with ground-to-ground, ship-to-ground, and air-to-ground missiles. Moon urged the North to engage in dialogue instead of reckless acts.
We have no choice but to push for strong sanctions and continue pressure on the North with the international community until Pyongyang abandons its nuclear and missile development program.
The U.S. and Japan have requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting. The UNSC is expected to hold the meeting Wednesday afternoon. Now, let's turn to China's response to the launch. NHK World's Kozue Hamamoto is in Beijing. So, Kozue, what's the latest?
The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang expressed grave concern over North Korea's missile launch in a regular news conference on Wednesday afternoon.
We expect each country to make efforts to put the situation back on track, to ease tension on the Korean peninsula, and resolve the issues through dialogue and negotiations.
So, Kozue, could you elaborate how China is trying to ease the tension? Will there be new measures coming soon?
The Chinese foreign minister did call for dialogue just last week, but as of now, there is nothing new on the table. Wang Yi said it was reassuring that the North had not test-fired a missile for about 2.5 months. He added negotiations are vital to avoid an escalation on the Korean peninsula. Today's launch, which appears to be an ICBM, puts China in a delicate situation. Analysts say China will want to respond seriously, but also will not want to provoke its ally. It will also have to consider how to balance the reaction from the U.S.
And Xi's administration recently sent an envoy to Pyongyang. So do you think it's difficult for China to break the deadlock?
This is all happening at a time when China's relationship with the North appears to be more strained. So far, Xi's envoy does not appear to have met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In recent months, Beijing has also cracked down on North Korean firms and joint ventures in China. It also announced limits on petroleum exports and a ban on textile imports, a key source of income for the North. China and Russia have promoted the so-called dual suspension plan. It calls for the North to halt its nuclear and missile programs and the U.S. to stop its military drills with South Korea. Now, the U.S. has already said it does not believe this plan will work. We will keep watching for developments from Beijing, but today's launch has likely put more pressure on China.
Thank you, Kozue.
Earlier, Yoji Koda, former vice admiral for the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, shared his thoughts on the launch with our colleague Miki Yamamoto.
The last time the North launched a missile, it flew over Japan. Yes. This time we're hearing that it took a lofted trajectory. Yeah. Why do you think that was?
The reason why the North Korea launched this missile by the lofted trajectory is there are two fundamental unsolved problems. One is the technology for the re-entry of the warhead, and another one is the rocket technology to put the warhead into the space. That is so-called the two-stage missiles and the rocket. So technology is, I think, the primary reason. But at the same time, there are the secondary reason. That is the political consideration. No provocation toward the United States or international community. So today's launch contains two reasons. One is the technology, and another one is the political consideration. Yeah.
It seems that their missile technology is advancing very rapidly. What does this latest launch tell us about the technology?
Still thank you. Still the amount of information available at this moment is very limited. But judging from the information available, today's launch has the capability to reach the mainland of the United States. Not fully, but northwestern part of the United States, at the range of about 10,000 kilometers. So if this is correct, North Korea really successfully gained the technology for the ICBM, or intercontinental ballistic missile. So this is the huge advance for the North Korea. So this is, I think, the very important signal to the United States.
But why do you think now? Why did they launch it now? And what was the message from Pyongyang?
And last September last year, the North Korea started the very aggressive, both nuclear test and the missile testing. But some point in this summer, most likely August or September, the North Korea stopped provoking the United States very badly. They started keeping the low silhouette. And there, I think that one very important reason for North Korea to keep the low silhouette, that is the U.S. anger, really, the political anger, both by the U.S. government and the American peoples. And second is the strong pressure from the international community, represented by the very hard UN's resolution on the September the 11th. So even the very hardline North Korea had to take those two important elements into consideration. So those are the reasons for the North Koreans, the quietness or low silhouette for last 2 or 3 months. But at the same time, there is the one very indispensable requirement from the military or the nation as the North Korea. That is that the test of the ICBM. So North Korea, at some point, had to do that. But they have to take the balance between the political pressure and the military requirement. And the one thing really triggered North Korea to go for this launch attempt is President Trump's redesignation as the North Korea as sponsor state for the terrorism. So that was a kind of the final key for the North Korea to go for this launch.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Koda.